Where are you at right now?
I'm currently in LA, Santa Monica.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah,
Um,
I listened to a few of the previous episodes you had there, and
yeah.
it's been fun to kind of follow your journey
Oh, sweet.
and just see you going out on your own exploring. I can definitely relate to that concept. About 10 years ago, I took a year off and went on a backpacking trip, just
Oh,
the
dope.
backpack and few
Yeah.
personal items, and it's a journey, man. So I'm happy for you that you're getting a
But
chance to do something like that.
before we dive into that, let's make it
Yeah.
official. Welcome everybody to the Two Degrees podcast, brought to you by the Play On Foundation. Today's guest, I'm so stoked to have him on here because I am such a massive fan of his work, and I think the thing that makes it so fun is that he's genuinely having fun. So everybody, we got Duane Perera, also known as Duane Shoots Toys on Instagram. And if you haven't started following his page, especially if like you're a 90s kid, 80s baby, like get on it because it's just the content is just 100% nostalgia, and it'll take you back and put a smile on your face. But yeah, how you doing? So you were saying you went backpacking. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was 2010.
Hmm.
And to give you a bit of backstory, it was an interesting time in my life because I had just turned 29. And at that time, I was dreading the idea of turning 30. Like I thought,
Hmm.
man, 30, that's ancient. I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
by that age, I would have had a family, kids, a stable job, and all that. And I had none of it, right?
Hmm.
And also at the same time, I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship after dating someone for 3.5 years, and I was also frustrated with work and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of thought it would be a good idea just to press the reset button, get a new perspective on things, and just completely shock my system.
Hmm.
So what I decided to do was take a year off and just go backpacking everywhere. And what I wanted to do was just get a taste of every continent in the world except for
Nice.
Antarctica. But so I flew to started off in Spain and went through Western Europe and then the Middle East and Africa and Asia and Australia, South America, and then came back home. And it was by far the most transformative year of my life
Hmm.
because the way I did it, it was very shoestring budget, like staying in hostels, doing couch surfing, just meeting people and experiencing cultures from the perspective of local people.
Yeah.
And it, yeah, completely changed the way I saw things. And it changed my values as far as, um, you know, back then, before I'd taken the trip, I was kind of materially focused, I guess you could say. Valuing material things, or at least being more attached to them, or wanting all these nice things. And then after this trip, I started to value experiences more so.
Hmm.
And now I would say I'm hardly attached to material items at all. I mean, I can appreciate nice material things, but for me, what's more valuable is just having the opportunity to experience things and spending my time doing fulfilling, engaging things. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Could you share any particular experiences that kind of shook you and have played a big role in molding the person you are today?
Yeah. I think first of all, when I was traveling, one of the things I enjoyed the most was experiencing cultures that were very different than what I was accustomed to in the modern developed world. So I
Hmm.
loved going to places that were still developing, a little bit rough around the edges, and seeing, in Africa and Asia, how people were able to be so fulfilled and happy living a simplistic life, right?
Yeah.
And taking joy in
Yeah.
these little things, whether that's creating or working on projects that are fun, or just sharing good times with family and friends and all that. And it was just kind of changed the perspective I had on things.
Yeah.
And I also did a lot of exciting stuff too, like I tried to plan certain legs of the trip around events like I ran with the bulls in Spain,
Wow.
and we went to Oktoberfest in Germany and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I did a whole bunch of like crazy things,
Incredible.
right? And it was just like a once in a lifetime trip just to kind of shake things up. And like I said, like I didn't, it was on a kind of a shoestring budget. So I only had a few $1,000s when I was starting out. So most of the money was borrowed on credit and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I ended up going into a bit of debt to do this trip, but it was well worth it because it was a life-changing event. And I'm glad I did it at an early age.
Hmm.
I hear so many people saying, I'm going to, work hard. And then when I, retire, then I can start doing those things. Right. But
Yeah.
I'm glad I did it young because like I can take those experiences and everything I learned from them and then apply them to the rest of my life. Right. And I was still young and healthy and able to move around. Who knows what I'm going to be like when I'm 65, 70, if I can even, walk around as much as I could back then. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
It's
very,
funny.
very
It's funny
thankful for
that
that.
you say you did it young. When I think of going out and exploring and stuff, I think doing it young is like taking advantage of that gap year between high school and college.
Yeah.
And then with all the exploring and stuff that I did that all post school, and I felt like I'm just catching up to all the other kids that kind of did take advantage of that gap year, right?
Okay.
So yeah, it's fascinating. And you brought up a really interesting turn of phrase, um, talking about how people are so fulfilled in those third world countries. And there's one story that always resonates with me. And I was 10 years old and I was in the Philippines, being born in Canada, went back to the Philippines for the first time. And I remember just being so miserable because the family on my mom's side there, they didn't have any gaming consoles. And I was
Right.
so bored. And I look out and I see these kids, and this game, all it is you put a circle in the sand, and then all the kids take one of their slippers, puts it in the circle, and then they take their other slipper, and the objective is to throw it into those pile of slippers and knock out the other slippers. And that was the
Right.
game. And these kids were so happy. And I was like, I want my Game Boy. I want my, and I was like such a little prat. But that's a moment that stays with me, and it really, you know, gives me perspective on what it takes to be fulfilled. And it's like I feel like not not saying I shot myself in the foot, or my parents, shot my foot by giving me all of the things that they didn't have. And then at the same time, it's like that's the effort that they're putting in, is they're trying to give me everything that they didn't have. But then at the same time, now I'm in this world of like, oh, I'm not happy because I don't have enough. And it's just, oh man, it's terrible.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely think a lot of people, especially in the Western world in North America, could really benefit by just traveling a little bit more.
Yeah.
When I was, traveling, I met quite a few Australians, and
Hmm.
traveling is a huge part of the culture down there.
Oh
They're
my goodness.
always
Yeah.
going to Australia, going to Asia, Thailand, all these different places, right? And a lot of them are very well cultured because of that. And it gives you a certain perspective. Whereas here in North America, there isn't as much of an emphasis on that. Like, people
Yeah.
will go to Mexico to their, resort vacations, which is cool, but it's not quite as common for people to go overseas and truly experience foreign culture. So I think people could really, really benefit from that.
And it's like, especially with Australians, I don't know what it is in their schooling system, but it's ingrained, where they
Yeah.
take advantage of the fact that, especially within Canada and the west coast of Canada, where they take advantage of the fact that it's all Commonwealth. So you can go and work there.
Mhm.
Where for myself, hearing that, I want to say I was mid 20s. And I was like, why is this the first time that I'm hearing this? Why couldn't this have been instilled in my education in high school, saying, hey, this is also an option, where I had absolutely zero clue. And so something about Australia, like they're just doing it right, and
Yeah.
they're they're still fairly young, and they're still evolving, as seen through like the way that their government is giving back to their indigenous. Where why haven't we, done that yet? We're still in Canada, and especially in the US, like still trying to beat around the bush of, oh, they want land back. Let's give them land back. It's like, no, we'll, just give them this treaty, or we'll give them whatever. It's like, give them what they're asking for. And with that, like next to Australia and New Zealand is on point when it comes to just cultural diversity and having it all together.
Yeah.
Oh man. But
Yeah. And
oh, go on.
I was going to say, even here in Alberta, like if you go skiing on any of the mountains here, half of the ski instructors are
All
either from
Australian.
Australia, New Zealand. Yeah, it's interesting to see.
Oh man.
So everyone's, yeah, they're all coming over here and experiencing foreign culture, which is great.
Now I want to go back to the travel story, and to dive more into the ending, where you went to shake things up and then you got back home, and then where was your mind?
Yeah, see, that was interesting because before I left on my trip, I had no idea what I was going to do when I
Hmm.
came back. Right, I didn't have any kind of job lined up. I was just, just decided to go out and come back, and whatever happens, happens. When I came back, there was a period where I was still a little bit uncertain about the future as far as career, but
Hmm.
I had a lot better understanding of myself, and there were lots of insecurities that I had been able to address while I was on the road, just as
Yeah.
far as like
Can I
I
ask what
didn't
your
feel.
schooling was, and if you were working before you went?
Yeah, so kind of a weird story, I guess. So I studied computer engineering in university.
Okay.
I didn't do it because I was super passionate about computers or engineering. It was just one of those things where growing up, I didn't really know what I would do as a career.
Hmm.
And my parents kind of pushed me in the direction of either becoming a doctor or an engineer. I decided engineering. And but by the time I graduated, I realized my heart was not in it at all.
Gotcha.
Um, so I got my degree, and that satisfied my parents. But I never worked as an engineer. At that time, my passion was actually music and making beats,
Wow.
doing music production. So
What
my
would your
dream at the
what would your
time was to.
Instagram name be then for that?
I didn't really have an Instagram. I did create a small one a couple of years ago, but I went under a few different names. I was originally at the very
Duane
beginning.
makes
I was
beats.
no. It was Deeper Era Productions. So my first
Hmm.
initial is D, last name is Perera. So I kind of put them together, Deeper Era, kind of a play on that.
Yeah.
But later on, I joined up with a friend of mine, and we went under the name Ansane, which was a fusion between my name and his name, which is Anson.
Hmm.
Um, but so my dream was to become a music producer, and I thought for the longest time that was that was everything I would ever do. I would never pursue any kind of art like I do now. Um, and it was tough. It was very tough,
Hmm.
financially especially. But I managed to get by for quite a while just by licensing beats to up and coming artists and providing background music for TV shows. Luckily, there were like tons and tons of reality shows that needed background music, so
Yeah.
I was able to submit just generic hip hop beats to them.
Are you still
And
receiving residuals off of those?
yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
Like a lot of
That's
that
really
stuff
cool.
I wrote back in like 2008 all the way to 2012, and I'm
Hmm.
still getting royalties from ASCAP for just the most random placements. Like a lot of them are reality shows, but I did get 15 seconds of background music on one episode of Dr. Phil, which was kind of cool.
Sweet.
And then Judge Judy, I had like a small segment, but a lot of them were like international versions of popular shows. So there was
Yeah.
like New Zealand's Next Top Model, and just like random
Wow.
random shows,
Yeah.
right? Impractical Jokers was another one that I had a lot of music on. So like just sports broadcasts, that kind of stuff. So I'm still fortunately able to get a little bit of income from that.
Before
And
we dive off that
so
and back into the story, could you quickly like
yeah.
give a summary of how you broke into that? Because when it comes to music, I just had another guest on where he was trying to be a face in terms of performing and being the next hottest thing in R&B, but then he found his niche in getting placements.
Mm.
So what was your trick to get your foot in that door?
The concept that I had was basically trying to create as much of a buzz online as possible, and then getting people to come to you, right?
Mm,
So we initially just started out just making beats and giving tons and tons of stuff away for free. And there were websites like back in the early days, there was mp3.com, but then later on, SoundClick was a big one.
yeah.
And we gave away tons and tons of beats for free, and that got us a lot of online publicity. And through there, music supervisors for different TV shows started reaching out, right? And you started making little contacts here and there, and you just sort of started to build, and it got to the point where I wasn't making crazy money, but I was able to make enough to pay my bills at the end of every month. And that to
That's
me
the
was
dream
was
of an artist, man.
exactly a big
Yeah.
success. And you know, for the longest time, my dream was to produce for, you know, the top of the top pop artists like Justin Bieber or someone
Yeah.
like that, right? And I still think that would be great, but you know, I was doing that for a while, just kind of getting by. And then it came to the point where I got frustrated with everything in my life, and that's when I kind of took the trip, because I had been working at it for
Mm,
so many years and didn't really have that peak level of success that I was looking for.
yeah.
You know, I'd gotten to the point where I can pay my bills, but still wasn't at the top. And this is after like making music for 7, 8, 9 years, right? And it was
Yeah.
kind of frustrating, right?
Fair.
But yeah, so I, you know, then went on my trip and came back, and I was, you know, kind of, like I said, I'd addressed a lot of the insecurities that I had. Didn't really feel a need to prove myself to people as much as I did before. I think there may have been kind of an underlying urge to like prove that I had material success to
Mm,
people, and I had gotten rid of that. I think a lot of it by the time I got back from my trip, which was great. And I was kind of messing around with music a little bit, but still, you know, not quite sure what direction I wanted to take. And then I got into photography, and this was, well, a few years later. This was about 2018, 17, around there. And I got into photography because I wanted to learn how to take better travel photos when I was on vacation
mm.
and stuff, right? Because all the photos that I took on my big trip, they were all taken with like a really terrible point and shoot camera. So I went to all these amazing places, and I have terrible photos to show for it.
That's
So
so funny.
yeah. So I decided that you know what, I need to learn how to use a camera.
Fair.
So I got a camera, and you know, in the process of learning how to use it and experimenting, I would take photos of random items around the house.
Mm,
And I remember one day I was on YouTube, and I saw people that were taking photos of model cars. And I saw that and I was like, wow, this is really cool, because they were making it look realistic.
mm.
And then I did a little bit more digging, and I found this entire community of action figure photographers. And when I saw that, I absolutely fell in love with that concept, because it reminded me of being a child again.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I was a kid, I had quite a few toys, but, you know, but when I became a teenager, we basically sold them all off, and I didn't have anything. But then at age, like I said, I was 36, 37 at that time when I started. I fell in love with action figures again. I decided to go out and buy a bunch of action figures and started to shoot them with my camera. And it's been it's been crazy how fast things have developed. I just like immersed myself into it, and I realized that in order to create these ideas that I had in my head, I had to teach myself how to build stuff and craft and
Mm.
make dioramas. So I spent a lot of time on YouTube, watching tutorials, teaching myself how to build all kinds of props and miniatures and stuff, and started incorporating those into my dioramas, and things just snowballed from there. And you've seen a lot of my journey. Like, I started kind of making simple stuff, and it's been progressing year after year. And I feel like I'm still somewhat early in the process, and I have a lot to learn. So I'm just going to keep on grinding and trying to improve my craft.
Fair. So you use the word action figure. So I want to hear your opinion on what the difference is between an action figure and a toy is.
Oh, well, when I think of an action figure, I think of, like, I guess, a humanoid type character that has articulation, right? So you can move the arms, the head, the legs, that kind of stuff. With toys, I mean, it might not even be a human person. It could be some, like, a car or something, or even if it is a figure, if you can't move the arms and the legs, I don't really consider that an action figure.
Gotcha. You said, like, you started first down this rabbit hole seeing people take pictures of toy cars.
Yeah.
So with those pictures too, they use a lot of forced perspective by using, like, real objects in the background, but then just making sure it's at the right angle. Did you ever try that, or did you always just dive into the dioramas?
Yeah, I didn't really play around with forced perspective that much, like maybe a couple of shots as an experiment. But for the most part, I don't know, for whatever reason, I just felt the urge to create little environments for the players, the figures to play around in. So I've pretty much been making dioramas since the beginning.
Okay, so with your final products and photos that you share, you need to be a dope photographer because you got to find the right angles. You need to be great with lighting. You've used Photoshop to just do fine details and figure that out. You've you've incorporated your computer engineering for 3D modeling now, which is dope. And then at the same time, now you're also designing, because, like, you essentially have to, especially when you print things out and then you paste them on in such an artistic way where it's realistic. So now you're incorporating all of these other aspects to your final product. Where did you get the time to learn everything?
Well, I don't have a day job, so I basically spend all my time just trying to learn. I mean, that's the issue right now. Like, it's been very challenging financially. I've always somehow, I don't know how, but things somehow manage to work themselves out at the end of the month. I've got little source of income here and there, but I don't have that much money right now, but I have all the time in the world, basically.
Yeah.
And from the moment I wake up, I'm working on either, working on a project or trying to learn a new skill.
Yeah.
Or, just creating, right?
Yeah.
So
no, that's the universe giving back, man. For you just focusing on your art and for being true to your art. That's the universe saying, okay, you'll be able to pay your bills this month. And it's like, okay, great. Now I can just continue what I was doing and having fun with that. So, like, it's again, it's the value isn't in the money, and when it comes to, making sure you're financially sound, that's perspective, where you have people that are happy with $0 after they pay everything. But then you also have those people that, no, I need to have, $1,000 in my bank account after I've paid everything, just so I can enjoy whatever. So it's like perspective is definitely a big part of that. While we're on the topic of money, though, what's some exciting opportunities that your art has led you to?
Yeah, it's been kind of crazy. Like, it kind of points to the power of social media, because you never know who's watching, right? And in the last year or so, I've had some pretty cool opportunities. And, I've been able to work with companies like Gucci and Netflix and, a bunch of toy companies all over the place. And I've had a lot of inquiries from companies that I haven't posted about yet, but I've got some pretty cool things in the works. And
nice.
it's wild, man. It's really cool.
Yeah. Now, what's the I'm drawing a blank on the term for this? Not timeline, but what's the timeline from conceptualizing something to its completion?
Well, that really depends on the complexity of the scene that I'm making. So
Turnaround time. That's what I was
turnaround,
looking
that's
for.
it. Yeah. Yeah, so it really depends on the complexity of the scene that I'm making. And as you've seen, some of my shots require me to make dozens and dozens of little miniature props, whether those are like video game boxes or vinyl record covers. In those cases, it can take a long time. Whereas
Mhm.
if I'm working with pre-made props, I can get it done really quickly. So I'd say on average these days, between 5 to 7 days from
Okay.
start to finish. I also I'm trying to make more of an effort to document the process as I'm working on things too,
Mhm.
and that can kind of slow things down a little bit because you got to set up the camera and then record myself painting
Yeah.
something or cutting something, and that kind of slows it down. But I try to get things done within a week for most of the projects that I'm working on.
Pros and cons for things that are pre-made to you making it from scratch.
Well, if I'm making something from scratch, I have complete control over the way it looks, over the size. Sometimes if you buy a pre-made item, it may look good, but it might not scale perfectly with an action figure that I have,
Yeah.
because all the figures that I have are different sizes. I've got big ones, I've got small ones. So, if I make something myself, I know it's going to be perfectly in scale with the figure that I'm using. Right. So,
Sure.
and also just by making things, I can make things that are not available commercially. Right. Like, I made a power glove or just random things that I loved in my childhood. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, what's your source of inspiration for, I want to say, cross genre or cross universe play, where you'll have different characters using something that's from like another show, or you'll have two very different toys and action figures interacting? Where does the thought come from of how or who is going to interact in your scenes?
That really depends. Like sometimes I'll look for a common thread between two different worlds. So I
Hmm.
may like try to do a play on words or incorporate some kind of pun into my scene. Sometimes I may just like the way that two characters look together
Yeah.
aesthetically. They may have nothing to do with each other, but I just like the way they look. Or it could be combining various things that I loved from my childhood. Like a
Like
lot of my inspiration does come from my early childhood years and teenage years, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. So
I just want to
that's something that I
describe
try
some
to
of these
draw
things that
upon.
you've done. So you have the Avengers with Bob Barker at not Wheel of Fortune, at Price is Right. You have Ninja
Yeah.
Turtles playing with Pokemon cards. You got The Office. You got SpongeBob eating McDonald's. Like, it's your the creativity behind this is just so amazing to see. And it's like, when you come up with these ideas, how does it go from idea to object or paper? So like, because you have to figure out how they're going to stand, what they're going to be doing in the scene, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fortunately for me, I feel like ideas come to me relatively easily, and I feel really grateful for that. I keep a text file on my computer where I jot down all my ideas. So anytime I get an idea, I'll immediately write it in there. And then when it comes time to do a project, I'll look through that text file and sort of pick, okay, I feel inspired to work on this particular project today.
Hmm.
And with that idea, I have a kind of a vision in my head as far as generally what I think it's going to look like. And then I just start building piece by piece. So I'll lay down the floor and the walls and then start building a prop. And it just kind of emerges from that. And I'm
Mhm.
taking photos every, couple days or every few hours in between the process. as I put new things on there, just to kind of get a feel for how it's going to look, and it just develops over time.
Yeah. And then with that, how often do you make something that you only use once?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Quite often, actually, because
Really?
yeah, I mean, because I think one of the most appealing aspects to what I do for myself personally is the process of creating something new.
Hmm.
So I love making new props, and sometimes I may make something new and only use it once, right? I
Wow.
try to hang on to as many things as I can. I don't want to turn this camera around, because if I did, you'd see like a complete disaster of an area, toys and props and everything everywhere, right? But I try to keep everything I have, and sometimes I will use certain items over and over again, especially things like video game boxes, or like I said, the album covers and tables, chairs, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But most of my scenes will have at least one or two items that are unique to that scene.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How often do you ever use clay to like make faces and stuff like that as well?
I used to use clay before I got my 3D printer. I would use clay quite a bit,
Hmm.
not for making faces per se, but more like making miniature props.
Okay.
I have sculpted a few like cartoon characters, like Sesame Street type characters with clay.
Hmm.
But human faces, I'm still not skilled enough to do that myself.
Gotcha.
Even the 3D printing, like often I'll print models that other people have designed. But I'm in the process of learning how to model human faces and objects. It's something that takes a little bit of time to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's uh, yeah.
What's your process of storage then? Because every artist has their own controlled chaos. So it's like
Mhm.
if I asked you now to get the Pokemon cards,
Mhm.
where is it?
Okay, so I keep related items together in little Ziploc bags, and then I put those in plastic storage containers,
Okay.
right? So I have all my video game related items in one plastic container, and
Mm,
then I have my sneakers in another one, shoe boxes in another one. So I kind of, there is a sense of organization in the chaos. Like
yeah.
an outside observer probably wouldn't see it, but I
Yeah.
can see it because I work with it all the time, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, lots of storage bags and plastic containers.
Gotcha. Now, one thing that I found really fascinating with your process is you build a scene that can be viewed from all angles. Is that intentional, where you just want the scene to be done its in entirety, or was that a lesson that you had to learn that, oh, I need to, because like, for example, I think the latest one that you posted was um, Ronaldo and Messi playing FIFA, but they're facing towards the TV, so you only see the back of them. But like
Yeah.
the front of is everything, like they're in full gear, and everything that's can't be seen from that angle is still completed to its entirety. Because like in my mind, I think, oh well, you don't really have to care so much if the camera's not going to see it, and then you should be able to cut down on time. But then what's the reason for you to go all out that it can be a scene from any perspective?
Well, usually I'm just trying to make as much as I need to take the shot that I have in mind.
Hmm.
But sometimes I may make adjustments to the angle that I'm shooting from. So just in case, if I decide to switch to a different angle, I want to make sure that, I don't leave anything out, so
Gotcha,
that all the
gotcha.
bases are covered. But I don't do all the details like in the front. Like there's certain aspects that you may not
Hmm.
see
Okay.
that I've kind of left out just because I don't want to spend that much time doing those little things. But I try to do as much as possible just to get the shot that I want.
Because like I want to say too, you were showing your process for you were doing video game covers
Yeah.
where even for the video game cartridges itself, where it's like it's in a pack, but you make the cartridge complete and then you put it in its case. Where it's like you didn't need to put the label on it if it's not going to be seen, but you still do it, which I find so fascinating. And it just adds to the detail, even though you can't see it, it's there, and it just adds to the fact that it's a complete scene. So I found that really fascinating and wanted to pry a bit
Well,
for that.
I do that for some of the items. I don't do that for every single
Ah,
video game case, right? So part of
gotcha.
that is for the camera, you know, like
Ah, that's
just
funny.
to show, yeah, some of the stuff I do. So like maybe 10% of the games may have that, not
Mm,
every single one, because that would, you
that's
know,
so funny. You
quadruple the
got
amount
me.
of
You fooled me. It
time.
worked.
Yeah, a little bit of camera magic for you there.
That reminds me of the time when my dad discovered that not everything on the internet is real.
Oh, right.
Because like when he discovered YouTube, that was it. He just went down this rabbit hole of watching every and anything on YouTube. And then it wasn't until there was the video that was done by, I want to say it was Concordia University, where it was the eagle picking up the baby
Okay.
on a golf course. And
Oh, right. I saw
my
that
dad
one.
like lost his mind. He's like, look at this, an eagle's gonna get the baby. And then he's like telling everybody, make sure you're watching out for your baby in open spaces. And then they reveal that it was not true and it was like
Yeah.
made up. And he was like, I've lost all trust in the internet.
Yeah. Mind blown, right?
Mind blown. Oh man. So now with that, let's go back. Let's go all the way back. What was toys like for you as a kid?
So I was pretty fortunate. My parents bought me quite a few toys. So I was born in the early 80s and I grew up with toys like He-Man, Thundercats, G.I. Joe, Ninja Turtles, Transformers, those kind of things, right? So I don't know if I was heavily into one particular franchise, but I had a little bit of everything, right? So I
Gotcha.
had one or two Transformers, one or two, Ninja Turtles, that kind of stuff, right? So
Mm.
I posted a photo on my Instagram a few months ago showing my childhood toy collection, and you can kind of see like there's a little bit of everything there. It's kind of chaotic, but some DC superheroes, Transformers, all kinds of stuff. Mr. T, just
Yeah.
random random action figures in there.
And then how did you used to play with them back then?
There were a lot of epic battles.
Mm,
GI Joes fighting each other. Ninja Turtles jumping in.
yeah,
Um, I used to love cars, just driving them, and airplanes, all kinds of stuff. And sometimes I would just hold on to them while I watched the cartoon on TV. Right, it's just something
that's
just to
cute.
look at, and yeah. So I used to love like those Saturday morning cartoons,
Yeah.
and it was such an exciting time to be a kid.
What's your opinion on individuals who don't take it out of the box?
Well, that's their prerogative. These little toys, especially nowadays, they're like little art pieces, right? So
Yeah,
for me personally, I take most of my stuff out of the box, but I still have a few figures that I keep just for nostalgia. Like I've
hmm,
got like an old like a Skeletor and things like that, and it is a piece of art, especially with the artwork they have on the cards. But it's also like it just triggers memories, right? It's like,
yeah,
oh wow, this brings me back to the day when I got this in this store as a kid, right? So
yeah.
I can respect it for sure.
What's your emotion like when? Because again, when I see the final product just on your Instagram page, like it's immediate nostalgia for me. But you're
Mhm.
there, you're shaping them, you're working with them. What's going through your head as you're developing the scene?
Well, for me, one thing that the audience doesn't get to see is, as I'm working on this stuff, I'm usually playing some kind of music that is related to the time period. So if I'm working on something
Mm,
from the 90s, I'm playing either 90s pop music or 90s hip hop just to get in the zone, right? So the whole process is like a nostalgic trip. Like I'm just reliving those years of my life, right? And it's so exciting. Like it's just fun to me, right?
yeah.
So the process of building it is exciting and fun, but also when I post it online, it's really exciting to see some people's reactions because, often I'm reliving my childhood memories through a photo, but then when other people see it, they're able to relate too, right? And then they'll say like, oh man, I remember this, like I was in the 7th grade and, I had this toy or whatever it is, right? And that to me is really fulfilling as well.
Can you share any comment that stood out for you?
Um, Nothing in particular. Again, it just
Hmm.
comes down to like when people say, like, this reminds me of when I was a kid, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
this is like on my 12th birthday, I got this same Nintendo game, or things like that. Like
yeah.
that's really, it makes me feel good.
And then like everybody on this planet can relate to nostalgia, and
Mhm.
especially when it comes to the particular type of nostalgia that you're producing, and with the content, there are a lot of celebrities that can also share that same nostalgia. Was there any post or repost from any celebrities that kind of caught you by surprise?
Yeah, yeah, there've been quite a few. The first big one was Will Smith.
Hmm.
Um, I grew up watching The Fresh Prince, and I was a huge fan of the movies like Men in Black and Independence Day and all that. And I made a photo. This was back when that Michael Jordan documentary was airing,
Yeah,
the Last Dance, and I made a photo of Will Smith and Michael Jordan talking about some sneakers.
yeah.
And he posted it on his Instagram page, and my mind was like, it was crazy, man, because like this is Will Smith, like he's one of
Yeah,
the biggest celebrities in the world, and he was someone that I really looked up to. So that was cool. Um, I've got a lot of like DMs from people, just people that I looked up to in the music industry, just rappers, producers. It's been really cool, been really
yeah,
exciting, and especially when they're people that I used to look up to as a kid, like that that means the world to me.
yeah. Um, Now with the, I guess the content that you choose to go with, um, what was the inspiration for your Kobe Bryant ones?
Kobe. So I've done a couple of Kobe photos. I did one, I think, before he passed,
Mm,
and that was a photo of him, Jordan, and LeBron playing poker. So that was kind of like a battle of the goats, I guess you could
yeah,
say.
yeah.
And unfortunately, he passed like maybe a month or two after I took that photo.
Hmm,
And so on his birthday after he passed, I made a photo of him in heaven with his daughter, giving him a
yeah,
birthday gift, right? And Kobe, man, like he had this obviously an amazing career, the best of all time. But I think the thing that makes it sad for me was I think he still had a lot left to give the world.
yeah,
Not necessarily as a basketball player, but just as a, first of all, an ambassador for the sport, right? And also I think he had like lots of creative ideas, like he was getting into filmmaking, and he
yeah.
had such a positive influence. So that's one of the things that really hurt me about him passing, was like it felt like he had so much more left to give and he didn't get an
Mm,
opportunity to do that. But yeah, I haven't done too many photos with him, but maybe I'll come up with something again in the future. We'll
yeah.
see.
No, you brought like an interesting aspect of he was getting into other things, and I constantly have like conversations with other artists of what is art. And a lot of the times people leave out things that aren't typically found in an art class, whether it be sports, whether it be, I'll even go to the extreme and say, if you're great at investing in crypto, you've turned that into an art somehow, right? And so, like
Mm-hmm.
with Kobe, I feel like the reason why he was so good is because he was an artist on the court. And that's what translated into him starting to explore kids books, starting to explore film, and so it's like with that, what is your definition of art, and what do you want your art to do?
Well, to me, art is just expression, right? I mean, I've got a lot going on in my head, and sometimes it almost feels like a burden, like to carry all these ideas. So the process of expressing them and creating art is therapy for me.
Yeah.
So it's just allowing things to flow, from the head down out into the world, right? So wherever those ideas come from, it's just pure expression. That's all it is. And when I do create art, as I said, it's intended to be an expression, but I also, hope to invoke emotions in the people that view it too, right? So when someone sees my art, hopefully it's going to create some kind of emotion, whether that is laughter or, nostalgia, or, just having some kind of memory or feeling like, oh, wow, this is cool, right? So that's part of it as well.
Now, with this particular art, especially how I pointed out before, there's so many facets to it to make it complete. Which facet of it do you find the most difficult?
Well, earlier on, you mentioned things like lighting and all that. So for me, I think the technical photography aspect is probably the part that I'm least skilled at. Like sometimes it's very difficult to get things lit up in the way that I want them to look. And that's just, experience. I don't have that much experience as a photographer. I think I'm more of like an ideas guy, coming up with concepts and like crafting and those kind of things. So I'd say probably the technical photography, but then sometimes it varies from shot to shot. Sometimes I'll have difficulty with even simple things like the posing of the figures. Sometimes they won't stay up, right? Or sometimes I'll need to use some kind of wires or something to hold them in a certain pose, right? Other times it may be difficult to paint something or craft something, but it kind of varies from shot to shot. But I think the photography at this point is probably the most challenging part for me.
Now, with the aspect of doing all of the work so it's tangible, when it comes to Photoshop, how much Photoshop do you put into your photos?
Usually when I'm using Photoshop, the main objective is to fix little blemishes here and there. So I'm not the best at crafting. Sometimes I may have like little nicks and scratches and things on the items. So I'll kind of erase those in Photoshop. I may touch up the lighting and fix the colors and all that. But I generally don't like composite images in there, like don't add things that aren't physically in the scene. That's like an entirely different art form, people that work in Photoshop. I like to, have pretty much the entire scene being like a physical item, a tangible item. I'm just cleaning things up and making it pop a little bit more.
Fair. Now, just because it's we've been throwing around the term scene a lot. Have you dabbled in stop motion?
I've had so many people ask me about that. I haven't.
I feel like that's the natural evolution from where you are.
It is. It seems like it would be. I haven't tried it myself yet. I look at those stop motion artists and I have so much respect for them because it's so time consuming. Like, you're taking like maybe 20 to 24 frames every second just to move, an arm or something, right? And to do an entire scene, to have at least 10, 15 seconds, that's going to take a long time. And what happens if you knock the figure over, right? It's just like, so I would like to explore that at some point. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe that's something I'll get into, but for the time being, I'm not quite ready for that time commitment just yet.
Fair. Yeah. Were you ever a fan of Parks and Rec?
Actually, no, I haven't seen that show. No.
There's a moment where
some of the characters.
One of the characters, he was having like that midlife crisis thing of, I don't want to be in an office. I want to be creative. So he goes off and he does his own thing. And then like I want to say the end of the episode now, like he's all disheveled, hasn't bathed, and then he's like, I spent over a week with my new project, check it out, and it's stop motion, and it was like 4 seconds long. Like,
Yeah,
so
exactly,
yeah. So
exactly.
it's
I've
like,
got to watch that episode. That sounds good.
oh man. Now,
Yeah.
with everything that you've created so far, is there an idea that's on your notepad that you haven't touched yet?
Well, like I said before, I've got a text file with tons of ideas. So like
Yeah.
I probably have over 100 ideas.
Hmm.
Um, it's just a
But
matter of
in
getting.
regards to it, you haven't touched it yet because you want to make sure you're ready for it, if that makes sense.
Oh, huh. I'm not quite sure if I have any ideas like that. I mean, maybe something along the lines of a stop motion thing, but
Hmm.
I think for the most part, I've got enough of a skill set to get by doing what I want to do right now.
Gotcha.
But I do, like I said, I want to get more into the 3D modeling and learning those skills. I still feel like there's so much more that I need to learn. I would love to like eventually learn how to sew and make my own little clothing for the
Hmm.
action figures. Want to learn, get good at airbrushing and painting and just up my skills a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. It's just anytime you learn a new skill, it unlocks a whole new set of possibilities for the
Yeah.
art, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, out of all the projects that you've done, what's the one that speaks to you the most? And I'm curious to know how different your inner dialogue was when you were doing that project compared to all the other ones.
Oh gosh, that's a tough one because like whenever someone asks me what my favorite photo is, like it changes from week to week. Like it's
Mm.
always becoming something different. So
So then
um
let's change the question then and not say just your favorite photo, but then your favorite action figure to put into your photos.
okay. I really love the Ninja Turtles. Those are some of my
Mm.
personal favorites. Like I
Any
love them.
particular one is your favorite?
Well, it's funny because I haven't used him very much in my photography, but my favorite turtle is Donatello. Just because
Interesting.
he was like the kind of nerdy tech guy, and also on top of that, he had the purple headband, and purple is my favorite color. So I
Mm.
really liked him. But I've used like Michelangelo a lot in a lot of my shots and Raphael. So I got to figure out a good scenario to put Donatello in.
Is there a thought process behind why Raphael and Michelangelo would be better for that particular scene?
It just depends on the content of the scene. So, like
Mm.
most recently, I did a scene with Raphael listening to some hip hop records and stuff, right? And to me, that suits his personality. Like he was the kind of edgier one in the group, especially in the movies,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So I thought he would be a good fit for that.
yeah. Mm.
For the Pokemon shot I used Michelangelo. So I thought he's more playful and kind of, hey, dude, check out these Pokemon cards, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I kind of switch them up depending on the personality that I'm looking for the scene that I have in mind.
Nice. Oh man, like when it comes to action figures and toys now, I guess not just so much that, but what lends to your inspiration nowadays?
Um, you know, like I said earlier, a lot of it comes from my childhood, but
Mm.
sometimes like
But like
even
for
in
example, you
modern,
you did Squid Games, right? So what
yeah,
inspired
yeah,
something modern?
yeah. So sometimes it'll just be a franchise or property that I'm, obsessed with at the moment,
Mm.
right? So I was really into Squid Game at that time. I was watching all those episodes. I loved it. Sometimes, I'll just be out in my daily life. Maybe let's just say I'm at a shopping mall or something, and I'll see a scene, and I just ask myself, like, would this make for a good toy photo,
Mm.
right? And sometimes it works out. Like, like if I'm out at a sneaker store, for example, I'll see that kind of shop, and I'll like think to myself, like, oh, okay, I could pose these characters here and make it look like that, or just creating things based on what I'm seeing in the outside world is sometimes kind of a challenge to me, and I love trying to experiment and see if I can manifested in like a miniature form.
And then do you ever take your camera out and then take a picture of that moment to use for reference later?
Sometimes, yeah, like just not my camera, but just my
Yeah.
cell phone. I'll just
Yeah.
take a photo. Sometimes, especially like if I'm trying to recreate like a store, a certain
Yeah.
type of store, I'll take photos of stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Now, do you have a thinking face? Like if you're out in public, let's say you're out at a restaurant and then there's a moment that just happens and then whoever you're with can just call you out on it. It's like you're thinking about a scene, aren't you?
I probably do, but I wouldn't know because I'm not looking in the mirror when that's happening. So
That's funny.
probably like a blank stare or something, or looking up or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. How emotionally attached do you get to the things that you create?
I don't know if there's an attachment per se, but there's a definite investment and involvement, I guess, like especially during the process. Like, yeah, during the process of creating it, it takes over me. Like, especially when I'm playing music in the background and just like reliving that moment. It takes over me. Like, and then once it's done, then I don't know if I have as much of an attachment to it. It's more so in the process of creating.
Gotcha. Because like that's what I wanted to lead to was like after you're done, what goes through your head when you're like, all right, it's time to separate each component and take it apart now? Is there ever a moment where it's like, I don't want to dismantle this?
No, I think at that point, like when I'm done, it's kind of a sense of relief because it's like I said, it's almost like a burden to carry these ideas in my mind. So I'm just like, get it out. And once it's out, it's like, okay, good. I took the photo, I can take it apart and then move on to the next thing. So I don't really have an attachment or anything. It's just like I said, it's just pure expression, just getting it out of the system.
Fair. Because a common topic that I find when I'm speaking with actors, especially when it comes to the artistic process, is the process of letting go. And for you to have your turnaround time that you do and then put it away, I feel if that were to translate into the acting industry, it'd be so much harder to put away, especially like when you first start off. Like I could probably admit if I was in your shoes and making these scenes and dioramas and putting it all together, I'd keep everything intact the way it was, just because. And then if I need more shoes, I'll make other shoes because like I don't want to touch this one. But that's where my head's at when it comes to letting go. Did you ever have that kind of need to keep things together and then made the realization, no, I have to let go?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have that luxury because I live in a tiny apartment, so I don't have the space to keep everything. Like, I mean, at this point, I've probably done a few hundred photos, right? So, just from a practical standpoint, I have to dismantle everything and
Gotcha.
store it away. But yeah, I'm sure like there are maybe a couple of pieces that I would have wanted to keep, I guess, but just can't do it.
Yeah. Now, you said you started getting into photography because you wanted to do that for your travels, so you can take better pictures on your travels. What's the place in your heart for traveling?
Oh, that's a tough one. As I said, I love going to places that are a little bit rough around the edges, places that are different than what I'm used to here in Canada. I loved traveling throughout Asia, Thailand, China, Cambodia, Vietnam, all these different places. It's really hard to pick one place, but I think
are you 3D modeling right now by chance? Was that the 3D printer?
just finished. Yeah. I'm sorry if it was making too much noise.
Well, I'm curious, what's that gonna be?
That is actually part of a synthesizer. I'm making a little music scene, and have some
Mm,
synthesizers and stuff. So
all right.
yeah,
I'm looking
my,
forward to
my
that.
my printer is running like 24/7, so I'm always
That's
doing stuff,
funny.
even when
No,
I'm sleeping.
I'm looking forward to like seeing if I can match up. All right. He said it was a synth. This is it. This is
Yeah.
when we filmed it.
Yeah, it'll probably be a couple of weeks because I'm working on some other stuff as well. But
Gotcha.
yeah, yeah.
So with traveling, do you then allocate a particular amount of time a year to travel, or was it that backpacking trip and then it's just travel whenever you get a chance?
Yeah, like I mean, unfortunately, right now, it's not really financially feasible. Like any money
Mm,
that I have right now is going into what I'm doing as far as the
yeah.
either buying action figures or props or whatever. Right, I'm
Hmm.
scraping by, getting by. Don't really have much to allocate towards travel. But I think if the opportunity comes up, I get a good deal on a trip somewhere, then I may do it. But I'm not
Yeah.
specifically saying I have to spend, a
Gotcha.
certain amount of time every year traveling. Yeah.
So since you picked up the camera for the purpose of travel, how many places have you been to?
Oh, at least a few. I'd say the most recent trip was Hong Kong because a friend of mine was getting married over there.
Mm,
So I've got a few photos on there that I took on my personal Instagram page, just taking shots of random things. Like I loved the buildings at night, so they had some really
yeah.
cool looking at all the different lights and stuff. So that was cool. And I also I went hiking in the Southwest United States.
Mhm.
So there's a place called The Wave. It's Coyote Buttes. It's in by Utah, Arizona kind of area. And they have this
Okay.
really cool rock formation. So I took some photos of that too. That was kind of cool.
And how much substantially better are your photographs now than before?
You know what? So well, I started taking photos in, I say 2018,
Mhm.
and 90% of the stuff that I've taken has been action figures, right? So I haven't really had that much practice taking landscapes, aside from when I initially got the camera, right? So I took some
Yeah,
photos at the beginning, and then the rest of it has been all action figures. So I'm not even sure if I'm that great at taking photos of like humans, like actual people,
that's so
and
funny.
landscapes and stuff like that. I don't know. I have to try it out
That's
sometime. Hopefully,
interesting.
get a
That's fascinating.
chance.
Yeah, well, hopefully, like it can translate too. But then, would you say because I wholeheartedly believe it doesn't matter the type of camera that you have, it's about the eye.
Yeah,
So it's like,
100%.
could you still have taken these photos with your phone?
No, they wouldn't turn out the same.
Gotcha.
Um, there is a significant difference between a phone camera
Yeah.
and like an actual handheld. Just as far as the lens, like there's much more flexibility as
What do
far
you
as what you can.
typically, what lens do you typically shoot with?
It depends. Like for my toy photography, I've got a couple of lenses that I use. One of them that I really like is actually it's a fisheye. So
Mhm,
it gives you like a really wide perspective and it kind of distorts the image in the middle.
mhm.
And I like using that on, I guess, portrait type shots because it makes the image pop out at you. It
Yeah.
almost looks kind of surreal. But then I've got just, regular standard lenses, like more uh, portrait lenses, different things like that. Like nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we're coming near to the end, but I want to dive into a little bit and see if I can get your insight on, I guess, happiness. Um, because it takes a lot to come to a place of doing something that you love. And I'm curious to know how you maintain that balance and how you keep that state of mind of I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, happiness it comes from personal fulfillment. Like engaging in things and spending my time doing things that fulfill me, things that allow me to express myself, and things that allow me to learn and grow. And I've really prioritized happiness over financial gain. And it's a balance, right? I mean, you want to have enough money to get by and pay your bills, right? You don't want to be on the street, but at the same time, for me, money isn't something that I look to acquire in order to purchase material goods and that kind of stuff. For me, money is like an energy, a power that you can use to make things happen and put food on the table and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't really contribute to my happiness. And life as a whole, I think, is just this really cool journey, right? And it's kind of cliche to say, but like I just love going out there and I don't know, I'm following this internal guiding light, and wherever this is telling me to go, I'll step in that direction and go for it without being too afraid of what might happen if things don't work out, right? I just kind of march forward in the direction that I feel inclined to go. And to me, that's a big part of what contributes to my happiness.
What's something that you've learned, and what's a way that you've grown with shooting these action figures and toys?
That's a tough one. I think a lot of it is just teaching me about the simplicity of happiness. Like, I've learned not to get too wrapped up in, again, like in material things. Like, to me, just the process of creating these things is so fulfilling, and it's so rewarding to me, right? And it points to the idea that you don't need a lot to be happy. Like, if you're engaged in something that uses your talents and your skills and engages you in such a way, that's really, I mean, the most important thing to me, just spending my time doing that kind of stuff.
Did you learn this mindset from somebody, or was this all just a self journey?
This is definitely like long-term journey. Like this, it's not something that it's one thing for someone to tell you something, but for it to fully be embodied in your being, like that takes a lot of time, right? And this is like something that I've developed over 10, 15 years. So it's been a journey for sure.
Could you go back then to the beginning of that journey, to like the first time you heard it, and do you remember how that advice was delivered to you and how you've made that your own now?
It's hard to say, like it's just been little steps. It might be like a book or like a movie or something like that. So it's just been not any one thing. It's just like tiny incremental things that I've heard or seen.
Yeah. And on that note, I think that's all the power that we have. Hold on, let me turn this off real quick. Let's do it this way.
Are you running on solar power right now?
Yes, sir. So it's nighttime here. Amazing. Yeah. It's an incredible experience. Like, kind of just looking around the space during the day and knowing that everything is being charged by the sun. It's pretty fascinating. Yeah.
That's so cool.
But what were you saying?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, if you leave your vehicle out for a day, is that good enough to charge you for a full 24 hours, or how does that work?
Today was a really hot one, so my freezer and fridge were working a bit overtime, so that's why it's draining as sooner in the evening as it is tonight. But typically, I'm usually able to last the entire day, and sometimes even into the next day.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. But Duane, man, seriously, thank you so much for coming and sharing your insight and exposing the fact that you don't do the complete scene and you're cheating sometimes, but it's okay. it's all right.
It's the truth.
But yeah, man, again, thank you so much for coming out. You are an absolute legend. And
Oh,
I'm looking forward to what other scenes you create in the future.
my pleasure, and thank you so much for the support. Like you've been one of the day one, I guess, or OG fans. So I
Yeah.
really,
Thanks,
really
man.
appreciate it. I
My
appreciate it.
pleasure for that. Yeah. But for everybody, thank y'all for coming out. Check out at Duane Shoots Toys on Instagram and check out his website, see everything that he's done. And if you were a fan of video games and toys, and I guess even just playing when you were a kid, because the scenes that he creates is definitely something that'll bring you back. And if you don't know the characters, like if you weren't into wrestling, maybe it'll get you into wrestling. I don't know. But there's a lot of nostalgia going on in this page, and I think you are going to enjoy every second that you spend on it. So other than that, everybody, the 2 Degrees podcast brought to you by the Play On Foundation. Thanks for coming out, and maging at kayo.